Welcome to another episode of the Dan Norton Show. It is Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. Okay, so I see a few people here. Welcome to the show. As I mentioned in the title, I support Ayn Rand's philosophy of reason, egoism, and capitalism. So that's what I am here to discuss or debate. You can be completely new to Rand's philosophy. Maybe you've never heard of her before, or maybe you've never read her before. But that's fine. I'm here to introduce new people to her ideas. So I welcome you to participate in the chat. You can ask questions, make comments, or just say hello. And I also have a phone line if anyone wants to call in and have a discussion or debate or just get to know you. Feel free to call in. The call-in information is pinned in the chat. So there's a Zoom web link you can click on. There's also a phone number you can dial. And I also have a call screening number. I might want to screen some people before taking their actual call. Um, so I guess depending on a particular case, I'll decide whether or not to use that call screening number. But the lines are open and I invite people to participate. I put a few chats in the a few comments in the chat already myself. I encourage people to get started chatting there even before the show starts. Often I will typically create a page for this live stream an hour or two before it starts. And if there are some topics already there once the show starts, which is usually 1 p.m. Pacific time, then that already gives me material to engage with. So I definitely encourage participating in the chat as soon as the chat is available. Okay, what else? I can. So as I said, this is open to people who are beginners, but it's also open to people who are already familiar with Ayn Rand's. Maybe you've been reading Ayn Rand for a long time, and maybe there's some topic you're interested in discussing related to her philosophy of objectivism. That's what she called her philosophy. So whatever your level of knowledge is, I welcome you to participate. Thanks for any likes. That helps gets this stream pushed out through the algorithm. Likes, shares, comments, chats, and subscriptions is also definitely helpful to my channel. So thanks for any and all of that. I often do a reading update since my last stream. I typically stream on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. So my last stream was a few days ago on Saturday, and I do a lot of reading in between streams. That's mainly what I'm doing between streams. And I focus on different parts of history. That's typically what I'm reading about. I really want to beef up my knowledge of history, and I've been studying it for decades. So, but history is such a vast field. There's always more you could learn, and uh, depending on what my interests are at a given time, I am studying different things. So, in recent weeks, I've been spending a lot of time reading about Israel, the actually pre-Israel, the British Mandate period in Palestine. So 1920 to 1948, before the State of Israel was established. That's what I've been focused on for the last few weeks. Um, in the last couple of days, I've been focused on the Arab revolt in the 1930s. So there was violence starting, I think, around 1920 between Arabs and Jews in Palestine. There was a battle in the northern area of Palestine, close to Syria, in Lebanon. I forget the exact name, Battle of Tel Hai or something like that. I think that was 1920. So in the reading I've done, that's often mentioned as the um, first incident of violence between the Arabs and the Jews in Palestine. But then there were riots after that in 1920. There were riots in Jerusalem. 1921, there were riots in Jaffa on the coast of Israel. And then there was about 8 years of peace until 1929. And then there were some big riots, the biggest riots to that point in Palestine, various parts of Palestine. There was a massacre in Hebron, which is, I think it's a few miles south of Jerusalem in 1929. And I think over 100 people were killed. And so that was mostly what I was reading about at the time of the last stream. But between the last stream and this stream, I've gotten into the 1930s. So there was some more violence in 1933, and then there was a revolt by the Arabs starting in 1936, where they were challenging the British authorities in Palestine. So prior to this, I guess the main parties to the violence were the Arabs and the Jews. And I guess the British who were in charge would mediate to some extent, but they weren't the main focus of attack. But in the 1930s, it wasn't just the Arabs and the Jews fighting each other. The Arabs were trying to overthrow the British who were ruling the place. So it's called the Arab Revolt. And that went on for, I guess, I don't know if it was a full year, but starting sometime in 1936 is when the revolt happens. There was a strike, which eventually it turned into violence. And then there was I think a period of about a year where the violence stopped, maybe because some concessions were made. I don't recall exactly. But then the violence started again, I think sometime in 1937, and then it finally ended in 1939. So that 3 year period of 1936 to 1939 is called the Arab Revolt or the Great Revolt, and that's what I've been focused on for the last couple days. And that also got me interested in reading some other things about biblical history, like the Temple Mount. This is an area that's sacred to the Jews as well as the Arabs. The first and second temple of the Jews was located on what's called the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And there's also some Muslim sacred sites, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. They're located on the Temple Mount. So both the Arabs and the Jews have religious interest in that area, and I was just reading some about that. The Western Wall, also called the Wailing Wall, is part of that structure. So I've been reading about that as well as the Exodus a little. So this is, if you know from the Bible, the second book of the Bible, of the Hebrew Bible, is the Exodus, talking about the flights of the Jews from Egypt to the Promised Land in Canaan, as it was called, what later became Palestine or Israel. At least this is the story. So I was reading a little about the Exodus. That was today, actually. So that was the most recent thing I've been reading. Okay, so I guess that covers it for my reading updates. So let me now take a look at the chat. I see we've got a couple chats here from new people. So welcome, ReasonRiffs and Wade O'Donoghue. So let's see what they have to say. ReasonRiffs says, you seem like the kind of person I get on with. I have a philosophy physics background, researching in the latter. Okay. I also have a background in both of those, more so in philosophy, but also some in physics. I was actually interested in both of those fields when I was in high school, and I wasn't sure for a while what I was going to major in once I went to university. Um, and I ended up taking classes in both philosophy and physics. But I think by the time I was entering university, I think it was pretty clear philosophy was my primary interest. Um, but I did continue to take some physics courses. It's usually basic physics courses, like classes for non-physics majors. I did take one physics majors class, but I think that was the only one. Most of the classes were physics for non-majors. Uh, but yeah, I guess we do have some overlapping interests there. If you say you're researching the latter, okay. I guess some characters in Ayn Rand's novel Atlas Shrugged also have an interest in both of those fields. They both deal with fundamentals, so I think that's a similarity between them. Philosophy deals with, I would say, the most fundamental topics. Ayn Rand defines it in one place as the study of existence, man, and man's relationship to existence. I don't know if that's exactly the way she puts it, but it's something along those lines. But it's the basic nature of existence and of man and of the relation between the two. So the most fundamental things about existence are studied in philosophy, like the fact that there is existence. The fundamental axiom of Ayn Rand's philosophy is existence exists. It's not sure you can get any more basic than that. And the law of identity, A is A. This is just a fundamental truth about existence. And that's another axiom of Ayn Rand's philosophy, one of the starting points that everything else rests on. That consciousness exists. That's another fundamental axiom in Ayn Rand's philosophy. The act of grasping that existence exists implies that you are conscious of that fact. So consciousness must exist if you grasp that existence exists. So these are the fundamentals, and philosophy deals with those sorts of issues. Those are the most fundamental of the fundamental. um, but then in the specifically physical realm, that also is, I would say physics is the most fundamental science within the physical realm. So you might divide existence into the mental and the non-mental, or you might say the mental and the physical. And I'd say within the physical realm of existence, physics is the most fundamental science. So you have biology, which deals with organisms, and then chemistry, which deals with the building blocks that make up those organisms. There's the however many 100 or so elements in the periodic table: hydrogen, helium, oxygen, all those. But then those are made up of even more fundamental building blocks: the protons, neutrons, electrons. Or if you get into subatomic physics, you've got things like quarks and neutrinos. I don't remember all the latest roster of fundamental particles, but those are the sorts of things which physics deals with. Um, so I think physics is a very fundamental science, the most fundamental science. Um, all right, let me read some more chats. We've got some few new people joining. Wade O'Donoghue says each generation of people start relatively less wealthy than the elites As the generations continue, is it fine that wealth inequality continues to grow? All right. So that takes us into a different area of philosophy, not the axioms of philosophy, but the politics. It's getting into politics, wealth inequality. That's a topic that I discussed somewhat in the last live stream. So let me just read that again. So Wade says each generation of people start relatively less wealthy than the elites as the generations continue. Is it fine that wealth inequality continues to grow? I have no problem with wealth inequality. What I am concerned with when it comes to politics, the most fundamental thing I'm concerned with is that people have freedom, that they are not initiating force against each other. That is, they're not starting the use of force. You can use, I think it's fine to use force in self-defense if someone attacks you, but you shouldn't use force to get stuff from other people, like a bank robber, right? He might go in there in a bank with a gun and threaten people and say, I'm going to shoot you or kill you if you don't give me your money. Or a mugger on the street could do this. So I'm concerned that people are not being coerced like that or threatened with force. That's the kind of society I want to live in. And I don't want criminals to go around threatening people with force, but I also don't want the government to threaten people with force. Unfortunately, the government does threaten people with force through various ways, one being taxation. You are forced to give part of your income to the government under threat of being hauled off to jail. And I think that's immoral and should not be legal. I think taxation is an unjust kind of law, and we should move towards a society that has freedom, one in which the government is not coercing its own citizens. And if citizens become unequally wealthy because some produce more wealth than others, that's fine. I fully support inequality. I have no problem with it as long as the inequality is not a result of coercing someone. You could become very rich, like Bernie Madoff, by engaging in fraud, but I think that's bad. That's not an honest, legitimate way of obtaining wealth. But if you obtain wealth without using force or fraud, that is deceiving people, being dishonest in order to get their money or their property, then I have no problem with inequality. I think everyone can get wealthier in a free society, which I would say is a capitalist society. Everyone can get wealthier, but people will get wealthy at different rates depending on a variety of factors. You could be born into a wealthy family, maybe you inherit a lot of money, but there's no force involved in that. So again, I have no problem with that. All right. Let me see. We got some other chats coming in. It's good to see. So let me look at some of these. Um, we got Habesh uh, and Miggy, but I think maybe they're just joking around. Uh, so might not read those comments if they're not being serious. Um, then we have JMAD who asks, any thought on mysticism or Jung? I I guess there's just you meant to ask, do I have any thoughts on mysticism or Jung? Well, on mysticism, I would oppose that. I support reason, as I say in the title of this live stream. I support Ayn Rand's philosophy of reason, egoism, and capitalism. And mysticism is opposed to reason, if that means like a belief in the supernatural or some supernatural being that you can't observe with your senses, like you're seeing, hearing, and so forth. If you just have to take something on faith, and that's why you believe it, if that's all part of mysticism, if you're following faith or not following logic, if you're not following reason, then I would oppose that for sure. I think reason is our tool of survival, our basic tool of survival as human beings. It's what allows us to do amazing things, like discover Newton's laws. And then Newton was a genius, right? But we all have a faculty of reason which we can choose to use to the best of our ability. And if we do that, I think our survival, our ability to survive, and it is much better than if we throw out our reason um, and act irrationally. So I think irrationality leads to death and destruction. But if you use your reason, you can produce values that enable you to live, prosper, and thrive and achieve happiness. So I'm definitely on the side of reason and not mysticism. Mysticism, I think, was prominent during the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, when there was centuries and centuries of stagnation or retrogression compared to ancient civilizations like in ancient Greece or Rome. Tons of knowledge was discovered and wealth increased, but then there was a backsliding during the Middle and Dark Ages when Western civilization turned away from reason and embraced faith to a much larger extent, and Christianity was in power. Um, so there's definitely survival advantages to following reason as opposed to faith or mysticism. As for Jung, I am not familiar with Jung. I know he was a psychologist who I think he was a student of Freud, uh, but I haven't studied him much, so I don't recall much about his views. Um, so I can't comment on him much. Um, Let me look at some of these other chats. Wade says existence is what can be. There's a lot of emergent phenomenon in existence. Um, so yeah, existence can change its form, but it never ceases to exist. So you might think everything is made up of stardust, right? Or like stars, there is, I guess, on some scientific theories, there's what's called a singularity, this very compact, dense piece of matter, and then it exploded in what's called the Big Bang. And that was just a change in form of what existed, but it never came into existence from nothing. It wasn't that something came from nothing. It's just that it was always in this one, or it was in this one form, this singularity, and then it changed its form. I'm not saying that's true, but this is just one theory of the history of the universe. And you might say everything emerged from the state that things are in now emerged from this other prior state when matter was more condensedly packed. Okay. And then we have RawFroglet, who I've seen here before. It's been, I don't know, a week or two, but I remember seeing RawFroglet. Oh, yeah. His comment reminds me of what the kind of stuff he was saying before. What his philosophy contributed to knowledge in the last 1,000 years. Yeah. I remember he was saying things like, or I guess I can address you directly. You were saying things about how philosophy hasn't done much, but science and math have done more. Um, so that was, yeah, that was a theme of his comments. So, well, in the last 1,000 years, I would say Ayn Rand is the brightest spot in the history of philosophy. I've seen a ton. I think she discovered a ton of important knowledge. I wonder if you've ever read Ayn Rand, RawFroglet. Maybe you could let me know in the chat. Of course, many people who have read Ayn Rand, they disagree with her, but that's what I'm here to discuss, or one of the things I'm here to discuss. So if you disagree with Ayn Rand, if you think she has not discovered any knowledge, if you think what she says is not true, you think her philosophy is wrong, well, we can debate that. But in my opinion, I think I agree with her philosophy, and I think she's discovered a lot of very important truths. So you ask, what has philosophy done in the last 1,000 years? I would say read Ayn Rand. You'll see. Um, and uh, and if you disagree with it, then we can discuss it, debate it, and maybe you're trying to do that to some extent in later chats. I'm just looking ahead a little bit, but let me keep going in order for now. By the way, John Locke, I think, is another philosopher of the last 1,000 years who I think discovered some important knowledge, in particular his theory of rights. I think he discovered a lot about the nature of rights, individual rights, which didn't, this is, yeah, new knowledge, I would say. So prior to Locke, I don't think there was much of an understanding of rights. Like in the Declaration of Independence, um, there's a mention of the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think the founding fathers of the United States were very influenced by John Locke, who was, I guess, a few generations prior to the founding fathers. He was writing in the 17th century. So his dates are 1632 to 1704, I think. And his second treatise of government, which is the main work by Locke, where he puts forward his theory of rights, was published, I believe, in 1689. So that was 100 years before the United States began. Now, Locke was not, I don't think he had a fully worked out theory of rights. He did think rights their source was God. I think he does cite God. So it wasn't a fully secular theory of rights. And this also carried over to the founding fathers. They say that human beings are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. So Ayn Rand has a more secular approach to rights than does John Locke or the founding fathers of the United States. So I don't think Locke has a fully legitimate, consistent theory, because I think if your theory of rights is based on supernaturalism or God or mysticism, then I think that's a big flaw in the theory. But I think there still are certain things about the theory of rights that Locke did understand for the first time. So I think he gets a lot of credit for explaining, for identifying certain things about rights, but he didn't have a fully worked out theory. And I think that had to wait for Ayn Rand in the 20th century. So Ayn Rand cites Aristotle as the greatest philosopher. He was in the last 1,000 years, but just to give a very broad overview of philosophers before Ayn Rand, who she had respect for, Aristotle, I think would be the top of the list. Also Aquinas, or like half of Aquinas. He was sort of split between reason and faith, but he was coming at the end of the Middle Ages, or what you might call the Age of Faith, and he was bringing Aristotle back into the Western minds and trying to reconcile Aristotle with Christianity, which I don't think ultimately can be done. In other words, I don't think you can reconcile reason and faith, but he tried to do that, and the direction he was moving intellectual thought was more in the direction of reason. And then eventually we had the Renaissance as a result of that, a more this worldly sort of approach rather than an otherworldly, mystical approach. So Ayn Rand also, I think she cited like half of Aquinas, like Aristotle and half of Aquinas. She once said the three A's are the, I don't remember exactly how she put it, but I guess the maybe the greatest philosophers in history, the three A's, Aristotle, Aquinas, and Ayn Rand. Uh, but I think she also does mention John Locke uh, in at least one place as having contributed important knowledge to philosophy. Okay, let me come back to the chat. All right, we're getting a lot of chats. That's good to see. Thank you, and thanks for the likes. Also, um, definitely appreciate the likes and any new subscribers. Is also great to see. Okay, so where did I leave off? I was. Oh, I see someone has tried to enter the waiting room on Zoom. Someone has tried to call in. So, and this is a person who has tried to call in once before, but I didn't get to his call. But I think I can get to it today. Um, Gubber Shib is the name, but um, he appears on a different name in the YouTube chats. Mange 5555 or yeah, I got it backwards. Three five fives and then mange. Um, okay, so I want to get to that call, but let me just look through a few more of these chats now. Um, and before I forget, let me. Oh, two people are now in the waiting room on Zoom. There's also Daniel. I think that might be. Oh yeah, Daniel Dunevant. He's also in the chat, and I remember he was going to call in a previous show, but I guess he had to go. But now he's back, so maybe we can talk some today. Okay, let me just adjust my Zoom settings to make sure they are correct before I take any of these calls. I have to make it so that when someone comes on, I have to ask them to unmute rather than them just being able to unmute themselves. That way I can control it better. Okay, so I'm not going to have time to read all these chats now because I want to get to calls, but I will read through them all later, at least after the show. But maybe if there's time later in this show, I usually go for around a couple hours. But so there might be time after the calls or maybe between the calls to engage more with some of these chats. But I do welcome you to keep chatting. Just keep it civil. And also, you're free to call in anytime, even if I'm already talking to someone. You can still get in the queue. And I guess that'll, if I know there are more people who are trying to call in, then it's, I guess maybe I'll make the call shorter so I can more likely to get to more people. But I guess if one call is going really well, maybe I'll want to spend some more time on it. It kind of depends. So no guarantees on exactly how much time I'm going to spend on each call. But do feel free to call in at any time. All right. So Mange was the first to call in. So I'm going to try his call first. Okay. Settings are correct. And I have admitted Mange. I guess he's joining. Okay. Mange is now in the Zoom call. but I have to ask him to unmute. And as soon as I do that, I should be able to hear him. So here we go. Ask to unmute. All right, I just asked you to unmute. Do you see, is Zoom telling you, is it giving you a choice to unmute your phone? Oh, he just sent me a chat in Zoom that says, give me 1 minute, please. Okay, maybe he was busy doing something. All right, I can hold on for a minute. In the meantime, actually, see, hopefully it's not a troll who's trying to set up some noise or something to blast like a previous troll did. But Mange has participated in the chat before, and he seemed okay. I mean, there hasn't been a lot. I haven't seen a lot of him, but he's been here, I think, at least a couple times, and he seemed reasonable. But there has also been people who pretend to be reasonable and then turn out not to be. I have seen that. So hopefully this is not one like that. But I guess I could go back to the other call, take the other call if he doesn't get here soon, because I think it's been a minute now. So I don't see a way to mute you. It's just at the point where I guess there's something on your screen that says it, that's giving you an option to unmute. So I might just have to remove you, and then you'll have to call back in if you want to come back in. Okay, it's been over a minute, so I'm going to remove you. Okay, I just removed Mange, who is known as, who shows up as Gubber Shib, because he was not ready to take the call. So I'm going to try Daniel next. Or maybe I could have put him back in the waiting room instead of removing him. Maybe that would have been better. And then he could have let me know in the chat of Zoom once he's actually ready. Okay. Sorry for this delay. All right. So now I'm going to see if Daniel is ready. So I'm just looking back at the chat. He said I could call in a little bit and talk about the purpose of philosophy, or at least the purpose of philosophy as I see it. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we can talk about that. So make sure I got my setting. Okay. I just admitted Daniel, who now shows up. And I have to, oh yeah, I say I could have put Gubber Shib back in the waiting room. Maybe that's what I should have done. But okay, I guess he heard what I said, or he could hear what I said. So if he wants to come back, then all you have to do, Gubber Shib, is call back into Zoom, and maybe I can get your call. All right, I'm going to ask Daniel to unmute now.
Hello.
Hello, Daniel.
Can you hear me?
I can. Your voice is a bit soft. I don't know if you can make it any louder, or maybe I can just turn up the volume on my end.
Okay. How about
That
now?
sounds better. That sounds better.
Okay.
I turned up my volume. I don't know if you did anything, but
I didn't really do anything, but
okay. I just had to turn mine up then, I guess.
I see. Okay, yeah. No, I saw what RawFroglet was saying, and I was thinking about that, and he said, you know, philosophy hasn't done anything. And I think it does a lot for people. I don't know what you feel, but I feel like it does a lot for people.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I'm interested to hear more on that. Like, why do you
So,
think it does a lot for people?
so in my opinion, e- everyone should be knowing who they are. Like Socrates says, I believe, that we have to know ourselves. And with the knowing of ourselves, we can reach our full potential. What does it mean to know ourselves, right? That means we know our societal context. We know where we are in society. So we know where point A is. Therefore, we can know where point B is. We can understand more fully how to navigate through our lives through philosophy, in my opinion.
There's a lot that could be said about the ways in which you know yourself. So, just to give one example, do you have free will? So if you, that's
Yeah.
one way of knowing
Mm,
yourself. Like you might think to know yourself means to, or part of what it means to know yourself is to know that you are a being which controls your own life. You
yeah.
control how things go. You're not just a puppet who
Yeah.
is acting as a result of forces beyond your control, whether that's your environment or your genetic inheritance.
Mhm.
So many people think that you're not free. You don't have free will.
Well, I personally am one of those people, but unless you can show me how to disconnect causal chains in between, the the life that you've led or the life that I've led, like, there's always things and experiences that have set us up for the way we perceive things and therefore the way that we react to them. And I mean, it might be a downer for some, but it also might be a wake up call that allows you to understand what tools you might need in order to react in a proper way, the way that you want to go. Like, how to use a paddle because it is deterministic how that paddle will affect the water and how that will move you through the lake, right?
It's deterministic. Well,
It's
just
yeah, it is. I mean, it's physics, right? In that case, I mean, obviously, that at least you'd concede that physics is deterministic.
I think likely it is, although there are many physicists actually think there is indeterminism in the quantum world, in the world of like subatomic particles. Certain things, just like whether a particle swerves one way or another, is just an issue of random probabilistic chance. I don't, I can't say I
Yeah,
agree with that,
I can't
but
say I can understand that either. Like, I
but I
mean,
think
yeah.
even if that is the case, I don't think that would be a any help to something like free will. If human beings are subject to indeterminism, meaning just metaphysical random um, events, as opposed to ironclad deterministic laws, in either case, I don't think we're in control of our behavior.
Interesting. So wait, okay. So uh, let me get this straight. You do believe in determinism or you don't? I'm trying to
I
understand.
do not.
You do not. Um, and you're saying whether the subatomic particles of quantum physics are deterministic or not isn't relevant to you. That's all you were saying?
Yeah, I think you could put it
Okay.
that way.
Okay.
There's
Gotcha.
what's also called indeterminism, which is not exactly opposite of determinism, because I think there are basically three, or the way I think of it, there are three kinds of causation, you can say. One is determinism, where everything can only act in one possible way.
Hmm.
Another is um, I'll call it indeterminism, where things act in a random or probabilistic way. And
Hmm.
then third, we could call it self-determinism, or free will. And that's where something is in control of itself.
Right.
It's neither subject entirely to deterministic forces that make it act in one way, nor is it subject entirely to indeterministic forces such that it just randomly acts in certain ways rather than being in control of the ways it acts. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there are alternative possibilities in the case of indeterminism, as I'm understanding that here, but you're not in control of the possibility that becomes an actuality, whereas you are in
Right.
control in the case of either you could call it self-determinism or free will.
Right. And I mean, and that's always what people are talking about as far as, do you have free will? That self-determinism is the essential focus. Um, but yeah, I think something that maybe informed my view, uh, or at least edified it, was reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I mean, in that book, it talks about how for all his life he had been searching for ways to deal with life and finding meaning in life and answering these questions despite hardships. He was tackling these questions. Later on, of course, he was taken into a concentration camp. He was put through all this peril. He was seeing all the things around him, and through that lens of his experience and through his studies of meaning, um, and how to find meaning in all parts of life through struggles. Um, he was able to uh, live well under those conditions. But obviously, people who hadn't gone through that long stage in their life of searching for meaning would not have the tools equipped for them to actually deal with those stressful situations. He talks about how some people just totally give up in the face of the atrocities of the camps that they were at, and it, you know, it there are things in our lives that I think, to me, it's hard to untangle the causal changes in our own lives. But yeah. Anyways, I don't want to get too stuck on that unless you're, um, unless you're interested in it.
Well, I was wondering what the connection was, if there is a connection between that and the issue of determinism or free will, which we were discussing before that.
I I mean to say that I think that I feel like in that situation, you can obviously see that those who are equipped with tools to deal with hard times were able to get through it. And you might say that they have a choice, but the reality is all of these people did not have those mental tools to cope with that reality, and the outcome was lesser. But those who had the experiences that gave them uh, the tools with their agency uh, to to deal with that situation were successful. So I feel like it's sort of an example of how at least our experiences determine how we process the reality that is in front of us, and therefore, in a way, determine the outcome of it.
Okay, so maybe this is a kind of environmental determinism. I do think the environment that you are raised in or find yourself in for some reason or other does have an impact on the course of your life. So there are certainly influences on a person's life other than free will, but I don't think those are the only influences. Like some people will say it's all nature or nurture. It's one of those two things, or some combination of those two things, where
Yeah.
nature is like the your genetic inheritance, and nurture is the way you were treated or raised that growing up as a child. And then those two forces, your genes and your environment, that's another way you could put it, nature and nurture. Those two things exhaust the causal factors that influence a person's life. And there's no room for anything else like free will. And I don't deny that nature and nurture or genes and environment has an influence. I think it
Okay.
certainly does, but I
Right.
don't think that's the only influence on a person's life, and maybe not even the most important influence. I think your own choices as an individual, which you can make regardless of whatever genes you were born with or whatever environment you were raised in, it's still up to you to make certain choices. That in Ayn Rand's philosophy, the fundamental choice we have is to focus our minds or not. That's directly within our control, and we can introspect this ability to either let our minds drift kind of in a passive daze or to take control of our minds and try to focus it on reality and grasp whatever is confronting us and deal with it. That's directly open to our choice. And depending on whether we make that choice
Hmm.
to focus our minds or not, we will do better or worse in life. On Rand's view, you need to focus your mind in order to deal with reality. If you just drift through life in a daze and don't focus your mind, don't engage it with the facts, then um, you will not do well. You will
Right.
not be able to achieve values, achieve happiness. So, yeah, I'm just kind of fleshing out a bit her view of free will.
I
But go
see.
ahead.
And I do I see that as it is true. It's right. It's true. I think that um regardless of the fact that it is true that you have to focus your mind in order to do well, um it it comes down to it also can be true that there's and you mentioned environmental factors, and you agree that there are environmental factors that your experiences that inform your decisions to a certain extent. Um, now, what where does free will come in if it's the case that you accept environmental factors, upbringing, experiences, mood, even at the time, if you accept those things and how they can affect decisions, where does actual free will come in? Like, I'm just trying to understand. Like, there's inputs and
Yeah.
there's outputs. I guess I'm thinking about it as like we're robots, so maybe my frame of reference is not the quite the right way to look at it. But where does free will come in your opinion? If it's not, you know, in environmental factors.
Okay. So, just to get a little background here, have you
Yeah,
ever read Ayn Rand or not?
I have not read Ayn Rand.
Okay. And you just came across my channel randomly, or do you remember how you came across me?
Well, I heard you on the Majority Report,
Ah,
and I like hearing your commentary there, and I think it's good to. I thought I'd follow up with you or talk to you about
okay, great. Yeah, a lot of people have heard me there. Some of my other listeners found out about me by my calls to the Majority Report with Sam Cedar. For anyone who doesn't know about those calls, you can check them out on my channel. There's a playlist of all of them. And Sam Cedar is a leftist political commentator, and I have called his show several times. So, anyways, welcome from the Sam Cedar crowd.
it. Yeah.
Nice to have you. Um,
Yeah.
Okay, so how does free will fit in, uh, uh, given that there are these environmental
Right.
factors? Well, I mean, it's maybe let's concretize the environmental factors.
Sure.
So, your parents, I would say, are one kind of environmental factor, or maybe you don't even have parents. Maybe you're raised as a foster child, maybe, or maybe you have one parent.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe you were raised by wolves. Uh,
Right.
so, in depending on which of those scenarios you happen to be raised in, it could have a large impact on your life.
Yeah.
Um, but I think uh, the nature of your parents you could have parents who treat you very well or treat you very badly. Maybe they beat you um, for no good reason. Maybe there is no good reason when it comes to at least like an infant or a toddler. They're just so young and they don't know anything. How could you reasonably fault
Right.
such a child to the point where it would justify corporal punishment?
Right. Right.
I don't really think that would ever be justified. But you might have parents that do beat their children, um, and that's an environmental factor. But I wouldn't say that determines you, such that, for instance, you now uh, beat your own children. Maybe you grow up and you have children of your own, and I think just because you were raised in an environment where you were beaten doesn't mean that you have to accept that that's the right way to behave and beat your own
True.
children. You can
True.
think about that and decide whether that makes sense. And you can observe there are other people, maybe friends of yours that are neighborhood, other children who live next door, and they're not beaten by their parents. So you can observe facts and say, well, just because it was this way for me doesn't mean that I have to act in the same way towards my children. I can see there are other ways to interact with people. So this is just one example of how the environment you are raised in doesn't determine the way you end up acting yourself. Maybe you have a sibling who does beat
Yeah.
his children, and he just kind of follows the example set by your parents since they beat you and your sibling. Now your sibling goes on and beats his own children, but that doesn't mean you have to.
True.
Um, so it
True.
depends on the individual. How does each individual choose to use his mind? And they might be raised in very similar circumstances, like you and your brother or sister were raised in the same household, but you might end up acting radically different once you're adults, depending on the choices that you each make as individuals.
I think I think that you're right. Uh, Brothers and sisters can exhibit completely different behaviors, and like some can break break the cycle, so to speak, as far as abuse. But I would point to perhaps the influences that they had, right? That changed their mind. And I know that sounds like I know I'm sort of like debunking your point or whatever, but I think that I don't think that things happen in a vacuum. And like the mind doesn't exist in a vacuum, and therefore it has to, have there's definitely something influencing it. Like it's not necessarily just that your parents abused you, so you do that. You observed those behaviors, and then you have this trauma, and maybe you go to treat it, and then maybe the counselor tells you, you know what, that wasn't a healthy way to deal with that situation. Your parents, they shouldn't have done that, and they explain why, and then that changes their point of view, and therefore changes their outcomes. So I mean, I guess I could, argue about this all day, but I think that um, it goes back to an old adage that a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. But I did see this comment by Donahue that was pretty cool or interesting. Victor used his free will to not give up like most of the people that surrounded him. This meaning is own self of
I think
self.
he means his is his own sense of self.
Okay, is his own self. I see. Yeah, I get what he's saying. Hmm, free will is the tool stronger than thoughts. I don't know. Um, but I guess that's basically um what I wanted to call and talk about. I guess we got on determinism, but I was talking originally about like the purpose of philosophy in general and like guiding our lives. But um I don't know if there's any other callers or we could talk longer if you like.
We can talk longer. Right now, there's no one else in the waiting room, although
Sure.
pe people are welcome to join. So, if anyone out there wants to call in, feel free to come in now. And as soon as I see your call, I will acknowledge it, and maybe I'll take your call. But right now, I'm happy to keep talking with you. Maybe just to reply
Yeah.
a bit
Yeah.
to that last segment on like there's some other explanation as to like
Right.
why the siblings might end up acting differently.
Right.
Maybe one sibling went to a therapist and got counseling,
Right. Right.
and the other didn't, and that's why, uh, or at least partly why, one doesn't continue the same sort of behavior that his parents um, engaged in, and the other
Right.
does continue. So you might think there's always something that explains it, and therefore it's still deterministic. It's just it can be very complicated to identify all the
Right.
deterministic
Exactly.
factors. Um, so I'm not sure what the best way to reply to that is,
Okay.
but one thought I had is um, how does that apply to this very discussion?
Hmm.
And is it a self-refuting kind of position? Like if we say you are, I guess by your own theory, if you're a determinist, you would have to say you were determined to be a determinist,
Right.
right?
Yeah, in a way.
And
Right.
I guess you would also say I was determined to not be a determinist.
Yes.
But if your position is one that you were determined to hold, is that compatible with knowing that it's true? Like can you say in your own mind, I know that determinism is actually true, as opposed to just being something I'm forced to think is true.
Well,
Can you get
I
outside
wrote
of
an
that?
article on my website, a couple articles, but one of them was about how do we determine whether something is true, and it's just basic epistemology. Okay, so you have a belief, and the belief is something that is in reality that you can observe, and you can justify it through some kind of testing. It's a justified, true belief that you have, and that's how you determine something is capital T true. Um, I mean, is that a full formula of how to determine whether something is true? It feels right. Um, Now, you do have a point. If I am, I, if I mean, to know whether I am right as somebody who is deterministic, uh, mean it would have to imply that I'm successful in the things that I have tested, that I'm you know, I have verified the results or the thoughts or the beliefs that I have, and therefore I know it's true. Does that make sense?
I still think it might be subject to the same sort of objection. So you have this theory of truth. I mean, it goes back to Plato, the justified true belief
Hmm.
theory. which has been challenged in at least since the 20th century. There was a philosopher by the name of Edmund Gettier. I don't know if you've heard of the Gettier problem, but
No.
he came up with a counterexample showing that if you have these three conditions, you have a belief, and it's also true, and it's also you're justified in thinking it's true, so you have justified true belief. It's nevertheless not what people would typically call knowledge. And I won't try to give his example. It involves luck.
Hmm.
Like if you just happen to know something by, if you get lucky, um, then that undermines the claim to knowledge. If you want to read his article, it's very short. I think it's just like one or two pages,
Well,
and I'm
yeah,
sure
I
you
mean,
could you could
go
follow it.
ahead
But
and
anyways,
you can send it to me,
whatever your
but go on.
yeah, whatever your theory of truth is, you could still say, or one could still object, well, you're just determined to think that's true. So how do you know you're not just forced or maybe biased into believing this is true as opposed to knowing it's actually true? I think that kind of objection is always going to um, be available to levy against a determinist. And
Hmm.
I don't see a way to get out of that. Like, how can you
Hmm.
claim objective knowledge as opposed to you're just
Okay.
forced to think
So
something?
you say that the um, justified true belief is not something that is useful or is something that is not really knowledge. I'm not sure how you make that claim or what that really means and why. Why is it not really knowledge?
Uh, how can I'm thinking, how can I elaborate this more? So, maybe we should just take an example of a claim that you think is justified true belief.
Okay.
So, how about would you say you have knowledge that uh, today is Wednesday? Is that a
Yes.
justified true belief?
Yes.
Okay. Now, uh, are you? I guess I could ask, um, how do you know how do you know that's knowledge? How do you know that that is knowledge, as opposed to something you're merely forced to believe is knowledge? How do you know you're not deluded?
Hmm. Um, I
What would you
mean,
say to that?
everyone else seems to think it's Wednesday, and I and I mean, I can look at, multiple sources, right? I'm justifying it through looking at the calendar. Um, I can look at what year it is and look at what day it is and look at all these
Okay.
things are justified by looking at information that is in the immediate reality that I'm in.
Okay. So let's take the calendar. So
Okay.
now I'm going to ask, how do you know that looking at the calendar is a way of determining that your belief about today being Wednesday is true, as opposed to you're merely forced to think that looking at the calendar will tell you what day it is.
To a certain extent, you're correct that it is our society that they have taught us that calendars are the source of like where the date is, right? So you flip the calendar, you go to that day. Um, yeah, I mean, like in a vacuum, maybe that's a good point, but I think that the larger picture is of the idea of Wednesday, knowing that it's Wednesday is a true thing and is knowledge. Um, is you can verify it through many things, and the whole world will say it's Wednesday, except if it's the next day on some other part of the world or whatever.
Okay, well the fact that the whole world believes it's Wednesday, at least the part of the, I mean, if we're in, if you go enough time zones in ahead, then maybe it's not Wednesday. I guess maybe
Right,
if you're in
exactly.
Australia now. Um, but if the whole world knows that today in wherever you are, in let's say you're in, I don't know if you're in the United States, but if you are, the whole world knows that in the United States, it's Wednesday
Right.
right now. I don't think that's getting at the essence of the issue because I don't think knowledge is essentially social. Like whether everyone, I mean, what if other
Well,
people thought it was not Wednesday? Would they be right? Like, does the
I
majority
mean,
determine the truth?
no,
Uh,
the reality is it's you can figure it out maybe mathematically too. It's not necessarily social. It just happens to be that there are a lot of social verifications that we can use. We can ask somebody, or I mean, there's a clock can tell you, which is a non-social tool on which to tell the time. All sorts of time measurements that are not social. So I just don't, I think that
yeah.
that's maybe not a great example, but mathematics are something that obviously you can test that over and over again. It's a justified true belief. 2 + 2 = 4. So it's, um,
Maybe we
uh,
should take that one instead. Two
huh?
plus two is four, because maybe that's more clearly not social. Um, I mean, I think the, uh, the the day of the week. I mean, the names that are given to the days. I think there is a social component to that in history. Like someone decided that these are going to be the names of the each day of the
Sure.
week,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
but something like two plus two is four. I think that's I guess less of a social
Right.
sort of
Yeah,
truth.
it's just there.
I mean, there
Math
are
is
still
there.
people who have to choose the sounds that stand for certain ideas, like the sound of
Right.
two rather than
Right.
dos, which you get in Spanish, right?
Right.
So there is some element of sociality that goes into this thought two plus two is four, but the idea underlying the particular sounds, I think, is less of a social sort of phenomenon. But we can just go to that level that and like try to strip all the social aspect out of it and just take something like um,
Yeah,
two
the
plus two is
concept of two.
four,
Right.
or I see a rock, which you might think there's no social phenomena going on there. You just see a rock, and again, setting aside the word you use for rock, just
Right.
the idea I see a rock, you might think there's no sociality, no social aspect to that. But
Yeah.
still, I could
Okay.
ask, or you could consider in your own mind, like, how do I know that it's true there is a rock as opposed to I'm merely forced or determined to believe it's true that there's a rock? What would you answer to that?
Well, I mean, it's entirely possible that everything is a dream or whatever. Our lives are a dream, and we're rowing, rowing, rowing away. But no, I mean, you pick up the rock, and you can see how heavy it is. You can test the weight. Maybe you can determine the type of rock. Is it sedimentary? Is it this or that? How do we know is a rock is a rock? I don't know. I use my eyes. Um, and just because, you know, uh, maybe I think it's determined, uh, just means that maybe I'm more looking for, I don't know, the things the composition of a rock is basically that it is hard. I pick it up, it feels heavy, and if I drop it, it falls hard and makes a loud noise. If I drop it on the concrete, maybe it leaves a mark.
Okay, so
Um,
there are various characteristics that this thing has that lead you to think it's a rock, and that's why you're justified in believing it's a rock. Okay, now I can
yeah,
just apply the same question to any of those justifications. So I could say, well, um, how do you know it's actually true that a rock has a certain density or structure or texture, as opposed to you merely being forced or determined to believe it's true that a rock has these characteristics.
I mean, I'm forced by a textbook and information around me to learn that a rock has these characteristics, right? I mean, um, information has can give you the understanding of the characteristics of a rock by people who have, studied rocks, geologists, and that can inform how you interpret what is a rock and what is not a rock. You tell a baby uh, or a toddler to identify something, they're not going to get it right because they have not been fed the characteristics that allows them to make these determinations. A baby puts anything in their mouth because they don't know anything, but they need to be fed this information in order to make sense of the world that they're living in. So, yeah, I mean, it's information, and it's a process that I mean, it's called schools, and they
Uh-huh.
teach us things.
Okay, so everything you just said, you were determined to say. So you were just forced to say
Yes,
that. But
yes, yes.
but so I'm coming back to the same line of thoughts. If you are forced to say something or just determined to say something or believe something, then I think that undermines the ability to um, regard it as knowledge. I don't know if I'm doing a good job or a bad job of trying to articulate this point, but what I'm trying to do is show that it doesn't matter what you say as long as it's something that you're determined to say or determined to believe, then you can't really regard it as knowledge. I don't know if that is clear at all at this point.
I
Um,
guess what you're saying, I kind of understand what you're saying, but let me see here. So you're saying because someone is determined to hold their beliefs, or me am determined to hold my beliefs, um, then the knowledge I gain in that frame of mind, in that framework, in that reality, if it were a deterministic world, um, is hard to determine whether it's true. Um,
it's impossible to
it's okay.
determine
It's
whether it's true.
impossible.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of maybe if I kind of talk from my own perspective, I don't know
Okay.
if that would help, but like, let's say I have this belief that I have a white and shirt on with black stripes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I believe that, but if I'm a determinist, I'm thinking, well, I'm just forced to believe that I have a white shirt on that has black stripes. But how do I really know that that I in fact have a shirt that's white with black stripes, as opposed to just being determined to think that I have such a shirt on? I don't see any way for me to get outside of that. Whatever I believe, I'm forced to believe, and how it seems that there's something lacking there. Like if I can't, if you can control your mind and say, well, I have free will that I can control whether or not my beliefs are governed by uh, biasing factors
Yeah.
or not, then I can be confident that the beliefs I hold to be true are in fact true. If I judge that I in fact chose to use my mind in a way that's filtered out biasing factors or emotional factors. Maybe that's a good way to put
Right.
it. I think your beliefs can be influenced by emotions like fear, for example, or the desire for social approval. I don't know, maybe if you're like climate science just came to mind. Like you might fear if you work at a university, you're not going to get funding for your project unless you uh, uh, agree to present as your conclusions a certain conclusion that would be agreeable to whoever's funding the science. So I think that in the area of climate science, um, the government who is granting the funds often has a certain view of climate and whether there's global warming or something. And if you go against that narrative, I think you are likely to not get funding, or at least not as likely to get funding from the government. And this has
Sure.
actually been, some scientists have actually experienced this. So you might think that these scientists' conclusions are being biased by some kind of circumstance, in this case, a
It
circumstance about who
could
gives out
be.
funding. But if you say, no, actually, I can control my mind and I can control whether or not my conclusions were dictated by this fear of not being funded, as opposed to being guided just by whatever the facts are, and I can observe which one of those motivations is guiding me, then I can be confident that whatever conclusions I reached are legitimate conclusions and not just something I was forced to reach. I know that I wasn't just being run by emotion. I was controlling my own mind. But if you're a determinist, then you're not really in control of your mind. You can't control whether
No,
you're.
I
Go
mean,
ahead.
I think that you with an understanding of reality, then you can you it's sort of there's like a colloquial phrase of make a decision, right? You can make a decision, but it is a informed decision, right? So the information informs the way that you act. And in the case of the climate science thing, obviously the you're making an informed decision, maybe to not believe in climate change or whatever, and you don't get the funding. Um, you're making an informed decision based on the information that you have. Um, so I think you, I see the way that you view it, and I guess this is a we're just going to run circles around each other because I don't think I'm going to be able to convince you. Um, but I think yeah, I understand your perspective.
Okay. Let me just take a look at the chat here. I don't see anyone else who's trying to call in, but I want to see what's going on in the chat. Um, oh, there's mange is back in there. I see he tagged me. He was the one who tried to call in. He was
Yeah.
glub something in the chat.
And if anyone wants to I have a YouTube channel too. I do philosophy as well. I don't have much on my channel right now, but I'm planning on doing more in the future. I'm just starting out. Um, but I think I'm going to head out. So
Okay.
thanks for your time. Maybe I'll call in another time as well.
All right. Sure thing. Thanks for calling.
All
Appreciate
right.
the call.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye. All right. Well, that was good. Uh, we got to have a discussion of the contradiction of determinism. That's what it's sometimes called, this argument that inherent in the idea of determinism is the idea that determinism can't be true, because in order to know that something is true, you have to not be determined. So to claim that determinism is true is to claim that determinism is not true. At least that's the argument I was trying to make. Now I don't know if I did a good job of that. Um, but that's uh, if you want to look up the contradiction of determinism, I don't know what you'll see if you Google that. Actually, I'm going to Google it right now and see what comes up. And it's definitely an argument that appears in the objectivist literature, but it's not, that's not the first place it appears. I think there's actually an ancient Greek philosopher who had this idea that there was some kind of incoherence or contradiction involved in determinism. Um, Alexander of Aphrodisias, I think that might be the name of the ancient philosopher who had this idea. Um, but this argument is also developed in the objectivist literature. So if you're interested in this topic, then one place you can find it is in Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff in chapter 2, which is on sense perception and volition, volition being another term for free will. There's a discussion of this sort of argument I was trying to run about how there's something in the very idea of determinism that undermines determinism. Um, it presupposes freedom. Um, Anyways, I haven't really discussed that much, maybe at all, on my channel before, so I'm glad I got to have a little discussion of that now. All right, so let me see what else is going on here in the chat. Oh, Gubber Shib is trying to call back in. He was the one who was there before, but he said he had to go away for a minute. So let me see if he's gonna see if it's gonna work this time. All right. I just admitted Gubber Shib, who is mange 55555 mange in the YouTube chat. All right, he's back in the Zoom call now. So now I just have to ask him to unmute, and then Gubber, you're gonna have to hit unmute, and then we should be able to hear you. Hello.
Hello.
All right, I hear you this time.
Excellent. That's fantastic.
Welcome
Uh,
back.
well, thank you. What a funny coincidence. I was going to talk about determinism as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if that's okay. Otherwise, if it's too much free will for one day, don't want to have.
Maybe we can talk about that, but were there any other topics that you were interested in discussing?
Uh, well, I do come at it from a slightly different angle, I think. I was going to ask more about the objectivist view of free will rather than, you asking him about his beliefs.
Okay.
Uh,
Well,
I,
I'm okay with talking about whatever you want to talk about. So I'll just leave it to you to decide how you
yeah,
want to get into this.
let's try. I do want to ask you about what you and him were talking about. You said your example of how do you know something to be true is you're wearing a white shirt, right?
Yeah.
Can you choose to believe that you're wearing a pink shirt?
I don't think so. I don't think you can directly choose your beliefs. There's a article on this theme by I think it's Ben Bayer and Greg Salmieri. They are objectivist philosophers, and I think they have an article titled "How Do We Choose Our Beliefs?" or something like this. So if you're interested in this topic, I would recommend taking a look at that. But um, just right now, I can say I don't think we directly choose our beliefs. What we directly choose, the thing that is directly under our control is whether we focus our minds or not. And if we do focus our minds, in this case, I would say I would come to the conclusion that I'm wearing a white shirt. Just to keep it simple, I won't say that has black stripes every time. I'll just say
Yeah,
I'm wearing a white
appreciate
shirt.
that. Yeah,
And I mean, that's a very simple belief. All you have to do is open your eyes and then apply these concepts you acquire at a very young age. The concept white and the concept shirt we get very young. And once you have those concepts, and then you're just you perceive the world, it's very easy to reach the conclusion that I'm wearing a white shirt.
But
But if
isn't
I
that
were drunk, right, or if I'm taking drugs and my
yeah.
mind is not functioning properly or in the way that uh, it needs to in order to reach knowledge of the world, then I think I would not be able to rely on my view that I'm wearing a white shirt. But since I know I'm not drunk or on drugs right now, it's very simple to just open my eyes and see that I'm wearing a white shirt. And I know that I'm not, well, not being a determinist, I think I can know that. If I were a determinist, I think I would have reason to doubt that truth. I would just think, well, how do I know? I'm not just forced by something, I don't know what, um, to believe I have a white shirt when in fact I have a pink shirt.
Well, isn't that the same thing that he said? You said from an early age you learned about white shirts, and you open your eyes and you see your short shirt. Didn't he say the same thing about rocks? He learned in school about the hardness and the
Mhm.
shape of a rock. Isn't that the same thing? He picked the rock up. He used his senses.
Yeah, and I think that's fine unless you have determinism in the background. So if you are a determinist, then you can't just say that, well, I learned in school that things with this and that characteristic are rocks, um, because you also have to say to yourself, well, I was merely forced to think that when I see something with this and that characteristic, that I should call it a rock. I was forced to believe that's true, but how do I know it's actually true?
But
That's a question you have to confront as a determinist. But I don't, not being a determinist, I don't have to deal with that sort of question. So I don't have to have this kind of doubt that I think you do need to have if you are a determinist.
but yeah, okay. But you did say that you are not able to choose what color you believe the shirt to be. So aren't you also forced in the same way he is to believe that it is white?
I don't think I'm forced. I mean, I could say I'm. I guess given that I've chosen to uh, keep my mind in focus, I am then forced by the facts to believe certain things. So you might say there's sort of there's a way in which I'm forced to believe something, but I'm only forced to believe something if I choose. That is, if I'm not forced to control whether my mind is in focus or not. So given that prior condition, I think I am, forced or forced to believe certain things. But I think if you're a determinist, then since you don't have control over that prior condition of whether your mind is in focus, then anything that you believe is something you're forced to believe, but you can't know that it's true. You can't know whether it's true because you didn't have control over whether your mind was in focus. So you don't know whether what's determining what you're determined to believe is something that's actually the case or just something that you were forced to believe is the case because of some emotion or some biasing factor in your mind. I don't know that I'm being very clear. I think I
Well,
have the
yeah.
sense that it's not fully clear, but
I
this
don't.
is
I find it the thing about focus in objectivist free will. I find a bit strange. Like, why is focus different from another function of the brain? Why isn't tiredness or creativity what you use to measure free will? Why is it focus?
okay. Hold on. Let me just take a note here of something so I don't lose track. Okay, so why is it focus as opposed to
Anything else?
tiredness or
Yeah.
creativity
Any brain
or
function. Why is focus different? Is motivation free will? Is
okay,
grit or discipline free will?
okay. By the way, before I answer that. I'm just curious a little about your background. Have you ever read Ayn Rand before?
No, I have studied it a little bit. I talked to an objectivist for like 5 hours once. He explained it in a very good way, I think, but I haven't read her books. It's fiction, right? Novels.
She wrote fiction and she also wrote nonfiction.
Yeah, I've read some of the nonfiction, the axioms, the primacy of existence, some of that stuff I've read, the facts, if you will, the belief system or the philosophy, not the books.
Okay, not the fiction. Okay, and I'm just curious if you don't mind saying, like, where are you in? It sounds like maybe Europe somewhere, or
Yeah, Scandinavia.
oh, Scandinavia. Okay, okay, nice. I visited there once. I'd like to see more of it. Okay, but getting back to your question, like, why is it focus rather than something else?
Yeah,
Um, in the brain, I think you said. Well, so here's one point I would make. I don't think of focus as being something that the brain does primarily. I think of it as something that the mind does. So I distinguish between the mind and the brain, or you could also put it as consciousness in the brain. Many people are materialists, and they actually think there's no difference between the mind and the brain, or the consciousness and the brain. They have a materialist view of consciousness. I'm not a materialist. This is an issue that comes up in a book I mentioned earlier, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. In chapter one, he discusses materialism and he makes arguments against it. So I don't know. I'm not sure how this might impact our discussion. Maybe it doesn't, but I just wanted to put it out there that I think of focus as being something that the mind or your consciousness does, and the brain is like the physical organ on which consciousness operates. And I think there's a two-way interaction. The mind influences the brain. Like if I make a certain choice using my mind, then that will have certain effects on my brain. I don't know exactly what the effects are. Does it make electrons swerve in a certain way or what? But it has some kind of physical effect on my brain. And there's also effects on my brain on my mind. So if I, for instance, I drink alcohol, that's going to have an effect on my brain that then impacts my mind. I'm not going to be able to think clearly. Um, so there's a two-way interaction between the physical and the mental. But I think of focus as being something that the mind does, and I guess maybe tiredness, which is one of the examples you gave, maybe that's more of a function of like if you're maybe you haven't eaten enough food during the day, or you've been awake for too long, and so your brain doesn't function as well, and then that affects your mind, and you might not have direct control over that. I guess you can just use willpower, at least for a certain extent, to overcome the tiredness. Like if you're falling asleep, um, you could just use brute force of willpower to keep yourself awake, but that's only going to work for so long. Eventually, you're just going to fall asleep whether you want to or not,
yeah.
um, because I think the brain has to have a certain amount of energy. It has to be in a certain state in order for the mind to function. But given that you do have that appropriate level of energy in your brain, then your mind can control itself and make certain choices. Um, but I would say
That's a
maybe as a
great
first,
answer.
okay. So maybe I'll just leave it there. And if you want to reply to any of that now,
Well,
go ahead.
that made it much clearer for me. It's a great example. The brain is tired, so that affects the mind. Uh,
Yeah.
that settles it, I guess. It's a little. Well, yeah, okay. Volition, you mentioned.
Yeah. I think of that as just a synonym for a different word for the same thing as free will or
Why is it volition? Wouldn't it be free volition? What's a
Uh,
will? What's a will in the free will?
yeah. Um, that's a good question. So I guess I don't know much about the history of this term free will, but I think it was a common view during certain periods of the history of philosophy. The philosopher Thomas Reid is coming to mind. I think he was a 18th century philosopher, and I think he might have had the idea that animals, they have wills, um, but they don't have free wills. So I'm not sure exactly what he might have meant by will in that context. Maybe it just meant like a desire. Like I might say, I will that it rains tomorrow. Maybe because I'm a farmer and I want my crops to grow. So I might say, I will that it rains tomorrow. And in that usage, I think will is synonymous with desire. It's just like saying, I want it's to rain tomorrow, or I would like it to rain tomorrow. But animals can have wants or desires, right? An animal can desire food. Um, so you might think animals have wills. There are things that they will to be the case. There are things that they want, but they don't have free wills. They don't have control over their wants or their desires, whereas human beings do. Uh, Not directly, I would add. This is kind of like the point I made earlier about beliefs. I don't think you directly choose your beliefs, like whether I believe that I'm wearing a shirt that's white. What I directly choose is whether I'm in focus. And then, given that choice, if I do choose to be in focus, then it will automatically follow that I I believe that I have a white shirt once I open my eyes. Likewise, with desires, I don't think you directly choose to have desires, but at least certain desires, like maybe your desire to uh, follow a certain philosopher. Like I'm a follower of Ayn Rand, I would say. I follow her philosophy, but I didn't directly choose that at some point, just out of the blue. There was a certain context that was set for it. I chose to engage my mind on the facts rather than just let it drift in a daze. And then, um, given that choice, and also, I don't think that's probably not the only choice that's relevant, but at least given that choice, I think that was at least one factor that led me to be a follower of Ayn Rand as opposed to some other philosophy. Um, so
That
I don't
yeah, okay.
directly desire to promote Ayn Rand or objectivism, but given some uh, prior event in a causal chain, like my choice to focus my mind, I think that eventually through maybe a stream of other intermediate choices that has led me to have certain desires, such as promoting objectivism. So I don't think you directly choose your desires. Maybe when you're an infant, you could say you have certain desires, like for milk, very simple physical desires, or the desire to get away from something painful. If you're a dog and your tail is stepped on, you might say the dog has the desire to get his tail free, and he didn't choose that desire. It's just kind of innate. So I think maybe there are some desires like that which you don't choose, but there are also desires about more abstract matters, like what philosophy you follow or what person you like to spend time with, which I don't think you directly choose, but they're a result of other things that you do directly choose.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we have found, maybe this is what the previous caller felt as well. This is the key issue here. I'm a little bit surprised. You're mentioning causal chains.
Yeah.
You're mentioning that you're not able to choose what you want to believe or not. The only thing you can choose is to, did I focus my mind or did I not focus my mind? What that's so it's basic because a determinist believes in causality, of course. It's a causal chain.
Yeah.
And you believe in a causal chain, but you have some ability to focus your mind, and yeah, but it's
Yeah,
still
so I
causal.
don't see I
Yeah.
don't see the ability to focus your mind as an exception to causality. I think it's just a certain type of causality. Now, it's commonly thought of when someone hears the term causality, they often equate it with a certain type of causality, in particular determinism.
Yeah.
But I that's not how I think of causality. I think of causality as a more in a more general sort of way, um, maybe Aristotelian way. So on Aristotle's view, as I understand it, causality. I mean, he has. I think this could be a complicated topic, and he has four different types of causation. There's the material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. And a lot of people, I think they take his efficient cause to be the only form of causation. And I don't think I'm gonna. Let me not try to describe each of those forms, but
No, let's keep it a little bit
there's
brief
another
here.
aspect of Aristotle's view, which is that an entity acts in accordance with its nature, and that's what it is to be causal. So everything has a certain nature, like a rock has a certain nature, such that if you're holding one and you drop it, it falls to the ground, as opposed to say you're holding a feather and you drop it and it also falls to the ground, but at a slower rate, maybe because there's air resistance, um, or a piece of dust. If you're holding a piece of dust and then you let it go, maybe it just floats in the air for a while at least. So, given a thing's nature, it acts in a different way. That's what I mean by saying entities act in accordance with their nature. And the nature of human beings is such that they can make choices. That's a form of that's just one form of an entity acting in accordance with its nature, which is what causality is on the Aristotelian, or maybe I should say Greek view. I'm not sure how broad it is. I mean, I guess there were determinists among the Greeks, like
Yeah.
Democritus. Maybe he was the founder of the theory of determinism. He was an ancient Greek philosopher. Um, but at least there was some tradition in the Greek world. Maybe Aristotle is the best representative that conceived of causation in a broader sort of way, such that all it means is something acts in accordance with its nature, as opposed to like acting miraculously, like you see in the Bible, right? Where you can tap on a stone with a staff and it turns into a snake or something, um, or you can part the Red Sea. These are miracles, which are instances of things acting in defiance of their nature. And that was a view that Aristotle, I think, would reject. He would say it's a contradiction of a thing's nature to act in these kinds of ways that you hear about in the Bible. Um, so there's nothing miraculous about saying a human being can make choices. It's not saying like a rock can turn into a snake or something. It's just a different form of causation than exists in the material world. And you might think that it's actually the form of causation we're most familiar with. And I think if you look at like primitive religions, they project their human form of causation onto the external world. They're most familiar from their own case. That's where they get the idea of causation. They observe the way they themselves act as human beings, and they say, "Well, I choose the way I act. Like um, I control my own actions. So maybe, everything acts like that. And when it rains, it wasn't just a deterministic effect. It's rather because there was some god, some sky god or some rain god, and he chose for there to be rain. Um,
Hmm.
so all the things that happen in the material physical world, which we today in the era of modern science see as acting in a deterministic sort of way, if you go back in time to a more prehistoric or pre-civilized sort of way, a pre-scientific outlook on the world, they attributed human agency to events in material world. And it was only later that science took a different view of the material world and identified that there are laws that govern things like when it rains and there's pressure and temperature. But then they kind of went to the other extreme, at least some philosophers, and they said, "Oh, now it's that everything acts like that. So everything acts in this deterministic, materialistic sort of way, and there's no choice at all." And I think that's maybe an overreaction to the success of modern science. They like Newton's laws. It's so amazing that we could figure out how things operate, and then they overgeneralized and they said, well, now everything acts in this deterministic sort of way, even human beings. But I think that's a invalid inference. I would say the right view is human beings have free will, but not everything has free will. The material world, apart from us, does not have free will.
Yeah.
But
So
these are just different modes of causation, both
yeah,
equally real.
absolutely. So I think I understand. I have a hard time understanding. Are you breaking a causal chain? Can you stop a causal chain with your free will?
I don't know if I would say you stop it or you alter the direction of it,
Hmm.
but I do think there is a way in which you are a prime mover, like the start of a causal chain.
Mhm.
It doesn't start in a vacuum, like I need to have a brain that's functioning in order to exercise my free will. And if I didn't have a brain, um, then I wouldn't be able to use free will. So it's not like my use of free will comes out of nowhere. There has to be certain conditions in place. I need a brain. I need to uh, not be drunk or on drugs, such that I have no control of what I'm doing. But given a certain set of conditions, I think I do have there is a um, there's a ability to make things go one way rather than another. So
Oh,
I'm starting a new kind of causal chain,
okay.
and it's up to me.
Yeah, so the basic example is, hey, do you want chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream? And you can spend, an hour debating, should I pick chocolate? Should I pick vanilla? You reach for the chocolate, but then you pull your hand back and you suddenly go for vanilla instead. Anything you do, like that's not more free will. Oh, I'm gonna pick chocolate, no vanilla, no chocolate, no vanilla. That's not more free will. That's just stuff. And the basic question is, okay, do you want chocolate or vanilla? I want chocolate today. If you rewind the clock of time 5 minutes and you make the question again, do you want chocolate or vanilla? The same causality is affecting me, so I'm gonna pick chocolate again. And we wind the clock back again, and it's the same causal chain, so I'm gonna pick chocolate again. Every time. Tomorrow maybe I pick vanilla, but on this day, the universe, the causal chain was such that I picked chocolate. And an indeterminist believes, hey, you could have picked vanilla if you wanted to. You could have changed the causality to pick vanilla instead of chocolate. I think that's the main disagreement. Would you agree?
This choice between chocolate and vanilla, I think, is a secondary choice. So the primary choice, I think, is the choice to focus your mind or not. I mean, that's Ayn Rand's view, at least, which seems plausible to me based on introspecting how my own mind
Yeah.
works. So I don't know that um, like if you maybe if you I don't know if this is the best example, like the flavor of ice cream you would choose, but I just want to mention that I don't think that's a primary choice. That's a secondary choice. So like given that I've chosen to focus my mind, then I might um, necessarily choose one of those rather than the other. Maybe if I think like if I have an allergic reaction to chocolates,
Yeah.
um, let's say
Or
I know
yeah.
that, and then if I'm out of focus, if I haven't chosen to focus my mind, then I might end up choosing chocolates or vanilla. But if I do choose to focus my mind, which will have the effect of enabling me to consider relevant facts about myself, like the fact that I have allergic reaction to chocolate. I'm not saying this is actually true, but
Mm,
um, just for example, if I
yeah.
know that about myself, if it is true that I have this allergic reaction to chocolate, and I choose to focus my mind, then that fact about myself that I have this allergic reaction, I can bring that to bear on that will influence the choice that I make, and then maybe I will necessarily choose vanilla. So I don't. This is another case where I guess, like I said about beliefs, I don't choose them directly, or desires, at least some desires, I don't choose them directly. Rather, what I choose directly is the choice to focus my mind or not. And given that choice, then I necessarily do various other things. So maybe in this case, I would say I don't directly choose the vanilla. What I directly choose is to focus my mind. And then, given that I've made that choice, my knowledge that I'm allergic to chocolate is brought to bear, and then I
Okay.
necessarily select the vanilla.
But okay.
And if I rewind the causal chain, like you were
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
and let it go forward, I'm going to get to a certain point again where I have this, I'm going to reach a certain choice point where it's up to me whether I focus my mind or not. So maybe the next time, if we were able to somehow rewind things, I would choose to not focus my mind, and then I would end up taking the chocolate. So I don't think it's
Mm.
true that you're going to necessarily do the same thing if we could rewind time and play it forward again, because I might make a different choice when it comes to this primary choice of whether to focus my mind.
Yeah. I I'm I'm wondering what the world would look like with no free will. Because I mean, it's possible that someone forgets, oh, I'm allergic to chocolate. I forgot, and they die. I died because I forgot that I was allergic to chocolate. That's shouldn't laugh at that, but like, is that the world? That doesn't seem like a worldview to me. Everybody is stumbling around and forgetting things and not focusing. I don't think that world exists.
Well,
Uh,
maybe you could consider the world of just animals before human beings.
yeah.
Like, I think only human beings have free will.
Okay.
Now, maybe there's some little element of free will in advanced animals like chimpanzees, the nearest primate relative, or whatever. But at least for the most part, I think it's just to keep it simple. I'll just say only human beings have free will. So if you want to know like what would the world be like without free will, well, I
Mm.
think you can just go back a million or however many years before humans evolved, and that would be what the world looks like without free will.
Mm.
You could still have life evolving, and um, you got the planets that
Yeah.
they
Yeah. I get it.
form, and then you have life evolve on certain planets,
Yeah.
at least the Earth planets. And but if it's if you're talking about like what would the world be like if humans were deterministic, then I would say, well, they're not really humans. That's a different kind of being. That's like another type of animal.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever meditate?
Mm, not for very long. I might have tried it. I probably tried it for maybe a few minutes, but it's not something I do regularly.
Okay, like how did you try it? Did you try to not think at all?
Uh, I might have done it different ways, different times, but
Hmm.
so I probably at least in one time I would try not to think about anything in particular, just make my mind go blank.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's possible to make it go completely blank, like unless you're in a deep sleep. Even then, maybe you're dreaming, but you just don't remember your thoughts. But
Yeah.
I don't know if it's possible while you're awake to have your mind go completely blank. But I think I would just try to get it as close to that as I could.
Yeah.
And
Maybe,
that,
yeah.
I guess, yeah, that was my only experience with meditating.
That's the Sam. Maybe you've read Sam Harris on free will.
I haven't read him. I've heard a little about his views on free will, that, he's a determinist.
Yeah. And he
And
uses that example, the meditation. You sit and you close your eyes and you try to not think any thoughts at all. And suddenly, before you know it, you're thinking about, why didn't she do the dishes yesterday? She made me so mad when she didn't do the dishes. Oop, never mind. I should not think anymore.
Mhm.
And you try again. And oh, why is that asshole in traffic yesterday? He honked his horn at me. Like the thoughts just appear in your mind. You're forced to have a random thought enter your mind. How
I
do you
do think
feel
that
about yeah,
thoughts can just pop into your minds without you choosing them to. Um, but I don't think that
did you
shows that
say,
it's.
sorry, did you say that you don't believe that or that you do believe that?
I do believe that thoughts can pop into your mind
Okay.
without you choosing them to.
Okay.
But I don't think that that implies that there is no free will. Like,
Hmm.
there are certainly some things about the mind that happen automatically. Like, if I say Mary had a little,
Hmm.
the word lamb probably pops into your mind if you know that nursery
Yep.
rhyme.
Yep.
Um, or the United States of, the word America might just automatically pop into your mind, whether you want it to or not, because something
Of
triggered it.
course. Yeah.
But so the fact that there are certain things that happen in the mind automatically doesn't mean that everything about the mind is automatic. And that's where I would differ, or where Ayn Rand would differ from someone like Sam Harris. He would say everything about the mind is automatic, and Rand would say no. There are some things about the mind, like whether you choose to focus or not, which are not automatic.
Hmm. How how does someone fail to focus? Isn't that the same thing? You're distracted by your own thoughts. Or what
How do you
does the absence of
fail?
focus look like?
It could take, I guess, two forms. There's drift and evasion. So the where one is um, evasion is purposeful. So you have some goal you're trying to achieve with your mind. Like, maybe you're trying to rationalize something, um, but you have some kind of sense at the same time that you're not really being honest. You're not thinking honestly. You're not really trying to know what the truth is. You're trying to uh, put something over on yourself in this case, not someone else. You're trying to pretend to yourself that maybe, like, that you weren't rude to a friend or something, or that maybe you cheated on someone, you cheated on a girlfriend, and you're trying to rationalize it and say, oh, well, she deserves it because, and you have some sense that she didn't really deserve it. I just made a bad choice, but you don't really attend to that peripheral sense in your mind that's you're just kind of BSing. You're just telling yourself stories. Um, so you have this kind of predetermined conclusion you want to get to, like that you were justified in cheating on your girlfriend, and you're not really open to the considering the facts that would weigh against that. You're just telling yourself whatever you need to in order to justify this conclusion. I would call that evasion. So you are purposeful in your thinking, but you're not thinking in a way that's engaged with that's trying to get at the truth. So it's kind of you're motivated, but in a bad way. You're not motivated by finding what the truth is. You're just motivated to get to some specific conclusion that feels good to you. So that's one way of choosing not to focus your mind. I would say if you're in focus, you're going to be tending to whatever is relevant to the
But
truth, not just
but
some
yeah,
feeling that you happen to like.
but I tried to say that it's not choosing not to focus, it's failing to focus. When you are focusing and suddenly you stop focusing, why did you stop?
Well, I think it is like, okay, so failing to focus versus choosing not to focus. Um, I'm not sure if there's a difference there. I think maybe well, let me go to the drift because I didn't talk about drift yet. I was just giving an example of evasion.
Mhm.
Drift is something different. It's not a purposeful sort of mental state. It's like the word suggests, you're just drifting along. Um,
Yeah.
uh, Maybe like watching, being a couch potato, watching mindless shows on television, or trashy reality TV show would be an example of someone who's in a state of drift. Um, maybe there's maybe he has a sense that he's not making a good use of time, that he's just wasting time. And I think for a certain period of time, I guess you can be drifting and not evading. But I guess after a certain, maybe you can like be a couch potato for a minute or something. But at a certain point, if you're just sitting there for hours and hours, you're going to be getting signals at some point, I think, that, this isn't the best use of time. I mean, you might need relaxation sometimes, and you want to watch TV for hours, but then you're doing it purposefully. I think it's fine to just relax and watch TV for hours if you're doing it consciously and like you recognize, I need a break. I've been working hard all day, and I just need to do something easy, and now is the time to do that. So that would be watching TV purposefully in a relaxed way. It doesn't mean that you're doing difficult mental work,
Mm.
but you're doing it, I would say that's doing it in focus, as opposed
Yeah.
to um, someone who hasn't been working all day. Maybe he wakes up and the first thing he does is he turns on the TV, and he knows he's got stuff to do. Like, he's in the back of his mind, he knows, I got to go to work and I got to make money, in order to pay the bills, and I can't afford to be um, just sitting here for hours watching TV all day. Now, maybe he can do it for a minute or two, and he's in a kind of drifting state where he's not really doing it purposefully, but he's not evading. There's not much to evade. But the longer time goes on, the more the alarm bells are going to be going off, so to speak, in his mind. He's going to have this increasingly obvious sense that he needs to be doing something different. And once he gets to that stage, it is going to be evasion that he's doing when he chooses to continue watching the TV. So I guess there's two types of state of non-focus. There's the drift phase, which might be relatively brief, and then there's the evasion phase. Um, and each of those is a state of non-focus, or I guess you could say failing to focus. But maybe I'm thinking maybe the term failing is more applicable to the state of drift. And then once you get to the state of evasion, where to sustain that state of non-focus, you have to actively choose to ignore it. Then it's not just a failure to focus, it's an active choice not to focus.
Mm.
Maybe I
Okay.
would try to analyze that distinction in that sort of way, between failing to focus and choosing not to focus. Maybe it's that once you get to the state of choosing to the focus, that's when you're in the evasion phase. But when you're just failing to the focus, you could be in the drift phase. Um, this is kind of off the cuff, relatively new thinking on this. So I don't know. Don't hold me to this necessarily, but that's my first line of thought on how I might distinguish between failing to focus and choosing not to focus.
Mm. Yeah, I'm struggling. I'm not sure what the difference is. Like it seems a little bit like a cop out to say, well, the free will is using information, learning things, working hard, making money. You're using these examples, making money, working hard, not watching reality TV. It's like a value system. It's like a judgment. You need to turn on your mind and stop wasting your time. You should get a job. It's like conservatism rolled
Well, no,
into
I
free
said
will.
you could be purposeful in watching
Yeah, you
TV.
did
Like
say that.
if you've been working all day and
Yeah,
you might realize that watching TV for a few hours is a good thing to do.
yeah.
I
But
gave that
you,
example. So I'm just saying,
yeah,
if
of
you are
course,
doing it,
of course.
do it with on purpose. Do it
Yeah.
intentionally. Don't just do it out of focus and be wasting your time away. But it's not necessarily a waste of time to
Mm,
relax.
yeah,
That's part of life. It's part of what
yeah,
makes life enjoyable, which is the point of life, I think, is to enjoy it.
mm,
Um,
yeah. I just feel like your worldview requires free will. You need to be able to blame the couch potato for his laziness. You need to be able to give more money to the hardworking man. If it's all determinism, then why should someone be rewarded for their causal chain that they're stuck in? Isn't
yeah,
that
I don't
sort of,
think it makes sense.
yeah,
But
okay.
like, I don't think reward and punishment, at least like moral praise or moral blame, makes any sense if we are determined, because it was all just going to happen inevitably. You don't really. So I, but
Mm,
I don't believe that we have free will because I think it's necessary in order to make sense of something like moral praise or blame. I believe in free will because it seems true when I introspect. Well, how does my mind work? How do I function? It seems like I have control over it. And I think it's because I have this sense that I have control over my mind and I infer that I extrapolate to other people and assume, well, they're beings like me, so they have control over their minds too. Um, that it's because of those observations that I think it makes sense to praise or blame myself, depending on what I do, and praise or blame other people,
mm.
depending on what they do.
But
So
you
I think
don't have,
the
yeah.
moral impact of this view of human nature is dependent on my observations on just what the facts are about how human beings operate, in particular how I operate, since that's what I have direct evidence of. And then I just extrapolate to other people.
Do you have direct evidence? How do you know objectively that your feeling of free will is real?
Well, I don't think there's any basis for doubting it. I think,
Causality is a basis for doubting it.
well, as I said before, there's different views of causality. If you have
Yeah, and where is the evidence for the different use of causality?
well, introspection is one. So,
And and that's a circular argument.
I don't think so. But why do you think it's circular?
Well, the question is, how do you trust? Why do you trust your introspection? And then you said, well, I use a different kind of causality, and I use introspection to find that kind of causality. That's circular.
Uh, repeat that, please.
Yeah, sorry.
I didn't get this.
I asked, the question was, why do you trust your own introspection? And you said, well, I use a different kind of causality.
No. That's not what I said. Um, I don't. We can rewind. I can watch this
Yeah,
later. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I don't think I said. Um, I think I said when you asked why trust my introspection that I don't think there's a reason to doubt it
yeah.
or
And then
something
I
like
said,
that.
yeah, and I said causality is a reason to doubt it.
Okay, and then I said, uh, well, that's because you hold a certain view of causality. I have a different view of causality, but
Yeah,
I don't think that's circular. That doesn't depend on a certain view of introspection. I mean, introspection is one thing that leads me to have a certain view of causality.
and
but
free will.
yeah, I
So
think
how
free
so
will is
how
a type
again,
of
how do you know
causality.
that your introspection is real if you use introspection for free will and for causality?
It's like asking how I know that my senses give me knowledge of reality. I think it's the primary starting point. I think where we start in epistemology, that is the theory of knowledge. I think our first contact with the world is through our senses, and animals have senses just like humans have senses. They can I don't think they can turn their attention inward on themselves. So that's something that human beings can distinctly do. We can introspect, but it's also a given. Like it's not something at least certain things we introspect are just directly observable, like pain. How do you know you're in pain? Well, you just feel it introspectively. Um, like how do I know if I have a headache? I just directly observe it or I don't. I either feel it or I don't. I just
Yeah, but
introspect.
you could have phantom pain, a fake phantom pain.
I don't think so. I think pain
Phantom
is,
limb, phantom limb
well,
pain.
so if you have phantom limb,
Yeah,
uh, uh, like if you have a leg amputated and
yeah,
you experience a pain as if it's in this limb which you no longer have,
yeah.
I think what you directly experience is pain. Now it's something else to conclude where that pain is. I don't think that's something you directly
Okay.
know or introspect.
Mm.
Um, you might be in the habit of inferring that where a certain pain is, but that you are in pain at all, set aside the question of where the pain is coming from. Um, just that you experience pain at all, I think is something that you don't have to infer. It's just something you directly experience or you don't. So I wouldn't say it's phantom pain. You might say it's phantom leg pain, and then the tricky part of it is what you get wrong about it is the location of it.
Mm.
But what you don't get wrong about it is whether you're feeling pain at all.
Yeah.
So there are something I think it's important to distinguish uh, what like the bare minimum is that we directly introspect and not conflate that with some other thing that is not directly known. Like in this case, the location.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, it's a small distinction.
yeah, it is kind of
Causal
subtle.
chain.
Like you might think like
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I haven't considered that example before, but um, I do think that there is some distinction there. There's something more basic about just knowing that you experience pain than when it's compared to um, believing that pain comes from a certain region of your body. There's something more basic about just thinking that you have pain. And I would say that you
Mm.
can't go wrong about that.
But okay. Yeah, I meant in general, it's a small distinction between determinism and free will. You still believe in causal chains, you still don't pick what you believe and you don't believe. The only difference is, did I focus before I made the decision, or did I drift my mind like some kind of stupid person? uh, how is it different from a soul? How is your mind different from a soul?
Well, the traditional religious conception of the soul, it can exist independent of the body. And you die, and then your soul departs from the body and it goes up into heaven or purgatory or something. And I guess
Yeah.
it gets reincarnated at a certain point,
Mm.
um, and it gets reunited with the body. I don't know all the theology. I
Yeah.
guess different religions have different views, but on my view, I would say there's no evidence that your mind, your consciousness, or soul can ever exist distinct from the body.
Mm.
Rather, it's an emergent property of the body. When your body or your material constitution
Yeah.
is in a certain form, then consciousness comes into existence. And I guess it can temporarily go away. Like if you go into a deep sleep and you're not even dreaming, then you lose consciousness. Or if you're in a coma, you lose consciousness or you faint. So it can go away and it can come back if your brain is changes its form. Um,
Yeah, and you didn't choose that either. You didn't design your own mind. Do I want to be a person who focuses a lot or who never focuses my mind? No, at no point are you making decisions. I want to be a focusful person, or I want to be a person who lacks focus. You didn't choose that either.
well, I don't think you choose it as a character trait uh,
Yeah.
directly. I think over time you do. Like you choose it indirectly. What kind of person are you? Like, are you characteristically a focused person or an unfocused person? I guess if you characteristically choose to focus in individual cases, if you regularly choose to focus, then you have indirectly chosen the character trait of being a focused person in
Yeah,
general.
but isn't that all a causal chain? Your upbringing, your teachers in school, your father who disciplined you, that's all causal chains that's making you focus or not.
I don't think it is making you focus. This came up some in the previous call. Like you might be raised in a certain kind of household where your parents beat you,
Yeah.
but two different siblings could have very different reactions to that. One
Yeah,
could,
so I'm asking you, where does the characteristic come from? You didn't design your brain, you didn't design your mind. You're making choices. Should I focus or not?
yeah.
Should I obey my father or should I rebel against him? It's all a causal causal chain, isn't it?
Uh, it's all a causal chain, but one of the forms of causation is choice. So it's just an irreducible fact, I think, that's injected into the stream of events, which might otherwise be deterministic. There are choice points where
Mm.
it's just up to you which way to go, whether to focus or not to focus. And you can't get underneath that, in my view, and explain that away and say, oh, really, there was something that made him focus rather than not focus.
Well, there always is something that makes you do something. There's always your upbringing. There's always your father beating you. There's always that book you read and you like it. There's always a causal chain.
Yeah, I disagree with that. No,
Okay.
I don't disagree with it. There's a causal chain, but I disagree that the causal chain is such that it always makes you do one thing rather than another. I think it's up to you how the
Yeah,
causal chain evolves
but
at
you
certain
didn't
points.
explain it like how your mind can choose to focus or not. But why? Why did your mind focus? Why didn't my mind focus? Are you born superior to me? You're better at focusing than me by some random chance, or
No, I doubt that's a valid question. Why did
okay,
someone choose to focus rather
yeah,
than not? If what you would take as an answer is something that explained that he had to choose to focus or choose not to focus, because if that's what you're looking for, then it's not really a choice. He didn't really choose to focus. He was determined to
yeah.
focus. It's not
That's
really a
my
choice. So I
that's
would
my
say,
belief.
yeah, so you're a determinist.
Yeah.
And then I think you're subject to the same kind of contradiction of determinism objection that I was raising with the last caller. You're just determined to be a determinist. You're just forced to believe that. You don't know if it's actually true. That's just what you're determined to believe is true.
In the same way that you are determined to believe your shirt is white.
Well, I would say no. I have control over my minds, and I know that I exercise control over my mind, and that's why I believe that the shirt is white. So I think I can be. I think there is a symmetry breaker. I don't think we're in the same position um,
Mm.
with respect to our beliefs.
Well, I didn't understand what you said. My mind focuses, but why does it focus? Why what was I born able to focus, or did I need to practice? Do you
And I'm
practice
saying that's an
focusing?
invalid question to
Okay.
ask why did someone focus? Because
So
that's presupposing that there is some factor that made them focus, that determined them to focus.
Well,
And the whole point
certainly.
of my theory is that there is not such a
Okay.
thing. It's just a root choice. It's just up to you whether you focus or not. So you
So
can't ask, why did someone focus?
so that's
Sorry?
the soul again. You are born with a soul that likes to focus. I wasn't.
No, I'm not born with a soul that likes to focus. I'm born with the soul that chose to focus or chose not to focus.
Mm. Yeah, I don't understand that part, but all the other answers you gave were very convincing. Thank you. But
Okay.
that one,
Oh,
I
you're
think
welcome.
you should revisit that one sometime and think about it. I see it as this person is good at focusing, this person is bad at focusing. It's not their own choice.
Yeah, I
You
think
never
that's
decided. You never decided, do I want to be good at focusing or bad at focusing?
yeah, I think that's just a root choice that everyone makes, and I think that's just available to introspection. We can observe that we have control over that, but I guess some people they don't they don't believe that introspection can be used or it's not a valid form of cognition. I disagree with that. But there's also skeptics about not just introspection, but the senses, like our sense organs, our sight and our hearing. They think the senses can delude us. I think that's also a mistake.
Well, we
Um,
have blind spots. We have blind spots in our eyes that we don't notice.
I was just listening to a YouTube video yesterday about this, that very example.
Yeah.
So I think there are differences in the amount of information you can get through your senses, but it doesn't mean that your senses are giving you a more or less correct uh, information about reality. It's just information. Like if I see blurry without my glasses, that doesn't mean that um, when things look blurry, I'm seeing things incorrectly. It just means I'm getting less information about the world, less information about where exactly one object stops and another starts. But the senses cannot deceive you or give you incorrect information because there's no choice involved. There's just automatic responses to energy impinging on you from the environment. Um, that's getting into a different topic, the whole topic of perception and whether it makes sense to its question it as a source of knowledge. Um, but I want to take a look at the chat here because it's been a while since I've looked at the chat. If you want to hang on, you're welcome to. I don't see any other callers trying to call in, but I just want to spend a little time here on the chat and see what's going on there. Um, see, we got let's see, Ben Franklin, Robert Nacier, Matthew Stroud, Wade O'Donoghue. So, welcome to all of you. It's been a while since I've looked at the chat. Um, Mr. Sebastia. Okay, some new people here. Looks like Darwin was there about an hour ago. Gosh, we've been going for about 2.5 hours now. Um, Let me see if I can engage with any of these. Maybe I should go to the end of the. I'm scrolling back in the chat to where I last was looking at it, but maybe some of those people have left. So maybe it's better to look at the end of the chat where I know some of the people are still here, and maybe engage with those. Um, Thanks for any likes, by the way. I definitely appreciate liking on the stream. And thanks for any new subscribers. Um, okay, so I'm scrolling to the end of the chat. Um, Ben Franklin says free will is when I can do anything I want all the time. And then Matthew Stroud replies, of course it isn't. and I expect you know it. Yeah, free will is not omnipotence. It doesn't mean you can choose anything. Like I can't choose to sprout wings out of my back and fly. I can't choose to be a woman, I would say, although I guess some people would dispute that. Uh, some, I guess that's become a controversial topic in the trans world. There's a self-identity theory, I think, according to which anyone who identifies as a woman is a woman. I don't think you can just choose whatever gender or sex you want to be, or what age you are, or what uh, race you are. You know, if race is a thing, I guess there's some dispute about exactly what race is, but I don't think I can just choose to be a woman, or I can't choose to be 85 years old right now. I can grow to be 85 years old, but I can't choose my age, or I can't choose to be Indian. So free will is not omnipotence, but I can choose some things. Right? I can choose whether to focus my mind or not. That is up to me. Um, Ben Franklin says he was joking, so okay. But I think that is a point worth making because I think some people do they have a incorrect view of what free will enables one to do. Um, Wade says, "What about feminine men?" I think that could be. I think that's a real thing. Um, there are certain stereotypically feminine traits, um, which men could choose, but I wouldn't say that suffices to make them actually be females. Okay. All right. I'm going to read through the rest of these later. And I think I'm going to end the stream. We've gone on for a good while now. And I will stream again on Saturday. That's my plan, at least. I typically stream Wednesdays and Saturdays at 1 Pacific, 1 p.m. Pacific. Let me just see if Gubber Shib wanted to say anything else. He's still on the Zoom call, and I guess he muted himself because now it's telling me I have to ask to unmute him. So before he goes, let me just see if there's any last thing he wanted to say. Okay, just hit S to unmute. Hi, you're back.
Yeah, I had to mute myself. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm happy. You know, we got some places. uh, I think I don't fully understand it. You are distracted by your own thoughts, even when you try to focus. How is that free will? But let's maybe, think about that one on
Okay,
my own
and
time.
I guess if you want to look more into this and maybe get a better idea of my perspective, there's there's some resources online on like the Ayn Rand lexicon. That's one
Yeah,
where there's
I saw a video by
okay.
Onkar something.
Yeah, there's also a video by him, and Harry Binswanger probably has some videos online about
Yeah.
free will. Um, but anyways, yeah, there's some resources out there on the objectivist view of free will,
Yeah.
and so if anyone wants to learn more about it, check those out.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you for your time, or thank you for allowing me on.
Yeah, you're
Thank you.
welcome. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Take
Goodbye.
care. Okay. Bye-bye. Alrighty. Okay. So thanks to everyone for coming by today. I appreciate your presence and thank you for participating in the chat. That is always good for me to see. That gives me material to engage with. Um, And thanks for the people who called in. And I will plan to stream again in a few days on Saturday, 3 days from now. So thanks for any likes on the stream and any new subscribers. I will bid you farewell. Have a good few days. And until next time, bye, everyone.